Wonderful. Well, thanks again for having us. I'm Robyn Meyers. I am the VP of West Coast Partnerships here in Los Angeles. And I'm so excited to be chatting with Ted. Would love for Ted to introduce himself as well.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Hi, I'm Ted Chi, SVP of Digital Marketing and Media Strategy at NBCUniversal, based here in sunny Los Angeles.
I love it. Well, that's great. Well, thanks again for joining me today, Ted. Before we get started and dive into all of the interesting insights that we'll be discussing, I would love to hear a little bit more about your career path. How did you get to your role at NBCU?
Well, I don't want to bore the folks on the call with too much detail, but I would just say, like my career path, I've always just had the opportunity to do stuff that I've been passionate about and I've enjoyed, and that included the stint at Activision. Used to be more of a gamer in my single days, and basically in the media and technology spaces. So I've kind of gone from, I've been at the Activision, at the Foxes, spent some time at Yahoo, Disney, and most recently Universal. I would say like the big kind of thread through my career is that I've gone from, and I've had people, recruiters share this, I've gone from big company to small company. I think I'm fairly entrepreneurial by nature, and so I've done a couple startups, and either they've had very tiny exits or they've run out of money, and then I've gone to a large company back and forth. But I will say one thing that's super unique about Universal and NBCUniversal in particular is it's just like an extremely entrepreneurial company. So, people use the word intrapreneurial a lot, and I definitely feel that at the company, with things changing so much, especially in the media space, it's a great place to be. So, bunch of stuff. So sports, technology, media is kind of like the crux of where I've been.
That's great. Wow. It sounds like a lot of fun. And what a journey. My goodness. Getting all of those different experiences, across, sort of the smaller and larger types of companies. I would love to, hear a little bit more about your management and leadership style. How would your team describe you?
Someone asked me recently, like, how would you describe, other than your title, how would you describe your job? And I think it would be two words. It would really be the digital plumber, because really, ultimately, my goal is just to make sure my team is not only are they productive, but they're happy where they're at, and they feel like they're driving the business forward. So that's everything from just making sure everyone's set for this is a crazy time. We're coming off of COVID. There are people are kind of transitioning back to work. In some cases, they've gotten used to being at home, so it's kind of a challenging time. So I think making sure people's like their mental health and their lives are prepared for something like that is super important to me, to make sure that they're growing and they're learning and providing stretch projects so that ultimately they're not, they feel like they're growing. And it's funny, it kind of goes back to my career background a little bit, because you get to a certain point, whether you're at a big company or a startup, and you start getting bored, and that's the worst place to be. So continuing to kind of push the team and learn and just recognize, it sounds corny, but recognize that they're truly people first.
I love that. Everyone, let's go look at NBCU for roles on Ted's team. You sound like an awesome manager and leader.
Oh, well, I will say, I mean, everyone has pros and cons, so you're going to have to ask the team. But in general, I'm very much of a people first and results driven manager.
That's great. I love that. Speaking of COVID, I heard you mention, addressing some of the challenges from a personnel and team level. I would love to hear around, how COVID shifted your strategy, if at all, at NBCU from a business perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about NBCU a little bit, and then I'll just talk about personal, which I think is more interesting. Well, I think maybe not. But on the NBCU side, we're in the film business. I'm on the film side, and on the transactional home entertainment group. And just overall, because of COVID, people weren't going to see movies, and that's clearly changed. And you look at, what's happening this summer. with Jurassic, and most recently for us for Minions. And people just weren't going to the theaters, so they still wanted to be entertained, and they were doing that in the home for a bit. So they were, when we launched Trolls, it was primarily in the home. People can enjoy it with their families. So there was a bit of a disruption in our business, and with just everything that was going on, not just watching movies, but even personally, I know that I don't really go to the gym anymore, and maybe if you had a full body shot, you'd see the results of that. But really, it just comes down to people are investing in their homes, and they're doing stuff at home, and I'm kind of conditioned. I don't really go out and shop that much. I mean, not a plug for Instacart, but I use Instacart for a bunch of stuff. So I just think that behavior, like that home-based behavior, it's certainly opening up right now. But that was the disruption on the NBCU side. But even personally, I think we've all really felt it. And I think there's something really deep down subconsciously as well. It's kind of, we're moving forward, and there are always different variants and always things going on, but I do think we're shifting to a sense of normalcy. But similar how we really don't know that much about COVID at the end of the day, we really don't know about, the kind of long-term implications of just our consumer behavior and how we work. And I can tell you, more recently, I've been going into the office a little more, and I enjoy it. I think it's great being around colleagues, but the commute, being in LA, is a killer. And you can really tell people are going back, and it's challenging in many ways. But we have all acclimated to it, and I think we're all kind of better on the other side.
Totally. I remember today, I'm so glad that you mentioned the Trolls release back in, when was that? The summer of 2020, I want to say. And I remember as a child, we were never allowed to order movies or anything like that because my parents were really strict about it. And I remember my kids really wanted to see it. And I remember thinking, wow, $20 to rent this. And we rented on Amazon Prime Video. I'll never forget it. And ever since then, I think it has normalized and shifted my mindset and our family and our behavior as to, what's possible and what's, what we're able to view in the home, and really making it, much more sort of premium home experience, which has been just such a wonderful thing. I think, you no longer, of course, we love going to the movies, but I think having options is always a great thing. So, back to your comment about shifting that mindset and behavior. It's just really so interesting. Kind of on the same, in the same vein, what trends have you been seeing from your purview at NBCU in the industry? Would love to hear a little bit more about, any market shifting dynamics that you can discuss.
Yeah, I mean, the term, well, a couple things, like maybe this is my background in games, but I really do feel like everything is gamified. Everything we do in marketing, it's all about, like retaining attention, acquisition, engagement, etc. So I do feel like the whole notion of keeping people engaged in certain ways is like permeating throughout everything. But I think that's been there for a while. I think the other thing is just you think about like the metaverse. Everyone talks about what's going on, and I've been like more and more so spending more time with my Quest and with Oculus, and just like thinking about that economy and people's level of engagement in the metaverse. It's going to be super fascinating, scary and fascinating at the same time. But I think clearly there's a ton of business opportunity and business applications there. And then I think the last thing, at least for me, is some of the devices. You look at it, like 20 years ago, I did a startup. It was called Food Jiva, and it was basically like what Grubhub is today, but pre-mobile. So that might date me a little bit. So, and you think about just some of the innovation that's been happening, and it's just happening across the board. But also throughout that time, you look at all the device releases. You look at Google Glass, and most recently, I think Snap came out with, I forget what it's called. It's their
I think they're spectacles, right?
well, there's the spectacles, but they also have the God, I can't think about it. The drone. So it's like
Yes.
a mini drone that kind of follows you around and
Mhm.
stuff. And these are like these devices. It's fascinating how this stuff is gonna, impact behavior and something cool like that. It's a test, but it could really turn into something big. The Google Glass one is, I remember years ago I had a chance to try that.
Mhm.
And I mean, the technology is amazing, and you think about it, that was a long time ago, relatively speaking. And now you have like other companies rolling it out just now, but it's
Mhm.
going to be more consumer oriented. It's not going to look like a weird Minority Report thing.
That's right.
Um, it's going to have a lot of consumer application. It'll be interesting. But I think technology, just in general, like the games and technology piece of it, is really changing the way we think as marketers, but also more importantly as consumers. I have 3 young kids, and I think about the day that they're like 30 years from now, what things are going to look like. Because I look back 30 years, I'm like, God, you know what?
Yeah.
Everything around us, it wasn't here at all.
I know it's so
So
wild to think about. I also have 2 young boys, and my 8-year-old was like, wait, I was referencing something around how I didn't have a phone to look up something, right? Like for now, for us, everything is instantaneously available and on demand. And I think that was such a like foreign concept to him, that like that didn't exist even 20 years ago. So I think so much has changed in such a short time, which is so exciting. Does that present any challenges to you as a marketing leader? Obviously, this sort of on-demand lifestyle now has got to be a bit challenging. Anything you can share there, Ted?
I just think as a marketer, I mean, the world is more and more fragmented. It's tough to reach different audiences from a media perspective or an advertising perspective. There's so many different channels and walled gardens, and everyone's chasing kind of like the MTA of it all and multi-touch attribution. And it's it's really hard to, when you think about like what's the one Uber KPI that everyone's working towards. Obviously, it's like everyone's trying to, maybe it's revenue or maybe it's people, etc. But when you look at across channels and stuff like that, it's really tough to have like an apples to apples comparison. Um, I wish everyone would just use, the same thing so we could easily compare everything. But I guess that's what some of our friends want us to do, but just within their own walled garden. But it's super interesting. I mean, I don't think there's it's gone are the days like of Mad Men and a whole kind of let's do a cool advertising campaign and try to forget. It's super fun now and it's super interesting. So never a dull moment, that's for sure. Um, that's why it's always fun, like stuff like this. I love to jump on um, events like this just to hear about what other folks are doing and how they're thinking about it. Because I think collectively, as a kind of what Brand Innovator does as a group of marketers, like we can only get better and learn from each other. No one has all the answers. I certainly don't. But just the more and more we can kind of collaborate, the better.
That's right. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people tuning in today are looking to you for some insight and answers, which is great, which is why we're here, right? So that's awesome. I would love to hear a little bit more. I mean, I think, obviously NBCU is known for so many wonderful franchises, right? Minions, you mentioned Jurassic. Can you share any cool insider info on how your team has activated around some of these larger franchises? I feel like everyone on the call is probably pretty interested.
Yeah, you know what? Obviously, I mean, there's no kind of insider baseball with this stuff. It's like, I mean, there are really no secrets. I would say, you have a franchise, like different types of films, right? You have a franchise like Jurassic where, people are familiar with, and we have a lot of other titles that are super cool, breakthrough, that our approach is just really different. We want to do something, everyone's going to do the block and tackling, but we're always looking for different ways to kind of reach our consumers. It's going to be different. Here, I'll give you one example. For Jurassic, one thing we've done is we've partnered with a studio to come out with I shouldn't say it, never mind, the press release is coming out soon. But Yeah. So I'll say, everything from, you know, creation of games. So like we'll create a trivia night, for example, for people who are really into the franchise because they're kind of they're kind of uber engaged in the franchise, and everyone kind of wants to be the expert. They want to they know all the dinos, or they know all the characters, or they know all the cars, etc. So we've done stuff like that for previously in the home entertainment for Fast, and then you have like different sweeps and promotions that we've run. Like for us, it's a little different because for the transactional business, we're not the point of purchase. So we're working with our distribution partners like the Apples and Googles and Amazons of the world, and just partnering with those guys to come up with kind of cool campaigns. One thing we did a while back was we worked with Apple and on the Pets, the Secret Life of Pets campaign, and we're able to partner with them and come up with creative, and then actually work with their Siri team, and actually like the theme of the movie is what are your pets doing when you're not at home. So we're able to get some Siri integration and get answers to those. So it's these things, and the way that came about is it's just very organic. It's hard to be like the things that break through. It's hard to say here's the plan and here's how we're going to do it. And I mean, there was one experience, company will remain unnamed, but there was someone on more the commercial side. It's like, okay, marketing, let's just create a viral video. It's going to go viral. What do we need to do? It's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, it sounds easy, but you just never know what's going to become viral. So it's experimenting, it's trying new things, but it's kind of layering on the tried and true. And ultimately, like the sweet spot is, what do we know about our consumer? We also do segmentation, like I'm sure many of the folks that are on this call do as well. So we understand based on the segmentation for us, it's like what are their movie preferences, and what are they doing, and just like the psychographics of it, and in addition to that, how we layer media onto that. Yeah, I mean, those are just some examples of some of the fun stuff we're dabbling with.
I love that. That's fun. How cool that you get to touch all of these iconic franchises and get to do so many interesting things, especially being in LA. I know we've got some time for questions. Just one more from me though, really around, and I don't think we discussed it, but I'm not going to really put you on the spot, so don't worry. Just any surprises since you've been in this role at NBCU? What's kind of surprised you most?
Well, previously, when I first started at the company, I was working on the distribution side. So I was heading up basically our partner marketing and digital distribution. And that was working with all the different accounts, like I mentioned. So I think one of the challenges that I experienced there was really just trying to own the consumer when you're not the point of purchase. I know it seems kind of silly, but just like the acquisition piece of it, and getting like engaging audiences when you're not, you'd think if you have like large franchises, there's going to be automatic built-in, people are going to be into it, but there's so many distractions, so much stuff that's going on that it's tough even partnering with some of these folks and really making sure people are engaged for the long term. One of the challenges for businesses where you have certain beats where you're launching something and then maybe it goes away for a little bit and you're coming back with it, a little bit like the film business, as opposed to if you have a product that's kind of that's evergreen. So right. I did an internship at Kraft long time ago, and I was working on Post cereals. Post is part of, I don't know if they still are, so forgive me if that's totally incorrect, but it was their at the time their line of Post Select cereals, and it's like evergreen. So I feel like you have a little more flexibility there, because if something doesn't work and there's a little more time, and the measurement is a little more clear on that end. Whereas when you have something on like more entertainment, whether it's film or TV or what have you, it's a little more hit driven. So sure. It's you don't have as much time to change the product, to do as much research as you'd like to do, because you kind of have one shot at it.
Mhm.
And that's one of the challenges. And that's what was, surprising to me, because it's such a creative process.
Sure.
And anything creative, there's going to be some great to it. But that's what makes it exciting as well. So nothing against the crafts and P&Gs of the world. I like, those are great companies, but it's just how we go to market is just different.
Totally. I mean, to that end, I would love to hear, I think test and learn is so important, right? I think, we're all doing it both internally within our own companies, to learn more, and then obviously externally. Obviously, like you mentioned, the window of promotion is just so much shorter, and super valuable for many of your films. Can you talk a little bit about, if you're able to do much testing and learning in your current role?
We are, and this isn't just my current role, but even like back to when I was at Disney and when I was at Yahoo as well. A lot of the performance-based media we do, it's very much test and learn in terms of, trying to get a sense for what creative is working and what channels are working. So I talked a little bit about like the fragmentation of the space. We still have KPIs per channel, and we're constantly trying to kind of pivot across channels, and in that respect, just to make sure that our campaign is being optimized and working. On the other hand, some of the like we talked about some of the various initiatives and the ideas and things that we're trying. That's full on test and learn. I think a good example is not us, but when you look at what I think it was Coinbase, they did the QR code for the
Yeah.
Super Bowl. It was a Super Bowl spot, and the thing was just bouncing around. The QR code was bouncing around, and someone could have looked at that and been like, "Wow, that's kind of weird." What are you going to do that? Like, people are used to all these kind of cool creative spots and stuff like that. I thought that was awesome. It's like, talk about like kind of breakthrough,
Totally.
basic but yet breakthrough.
Yeah.
So I feel like, yeah, it's kind of like the nature of the business right now. So it's just kind of an idea that you just never would have known that what the results would have been. The great thing there also is that they're able to quantify impact. It's, they know the result of that spot.
100%. Right. I think they broke the app store.
Yeah.
Or
So
the internet. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that whole DR piece of it is just, I mean, I love that. That's an area that I wish like we could do more of, at least just in general, like for my personal background. But yeah, the Coinbase thing, I mean, that's cool. I'd love to be in those rooms and hear those initial discussions
Totally.
and
So
be a
that was
fly on the wall.
the most, I think, memorable Super Bowl ad from this past year, of course, other than the halftime show.
Yeah, yeah.
It was so great.
And the other thing is, there's a lot of testing and learning, as marketers, like we talked about the metaverse, right? There's going to be a ton of testing and learning. Like, we're going to try a bunch of activations, and we're going to see what works and what doesn't. And we're talking to some folks there, and who knows, but we're gonna go for it.
That's great. I feel like that's so exciting, and that's what's the best part about digital, right? Is that things are always changing, and there's always new things to try. I'm now questioning if I should just be buying up some NFTs once I learn about them. So yeah, I think that there's so much change happening in the ecosystem right now. Anything else that you wanted to share, as kind of part of your journey, or anything else that you've learned, especially in digital, given that this is our future of digital conversation?
Listen, I knew a long time ago that I wanted to be a marketer. There's something about like sales and marketing, about influencing people kind of at scale. And so my first job out of college was to go to a bank. And you may say, like, why would you go to a bank? Don't worry, I'll come full circle on like what this all means. It's like, why would you go to a bank? And it's probably, like, looking back on it, I really wanted to get exposed to different businesses, but I really wanted to know like the nuts and bolts of a company and campaign. And that's the numbers, and that's the data, and that's everyone uses that terminology. It's really, so you flash forward to where I'm at now in digital, and it's like the data piece. And it's one thing to say, oh, okay, this number is higher than this, but it's really important to kind of internalize all of the data holistically and kind of figure out what the path forward is. There's always going to be a meaning behind all the information you're looking at. So, how do we move that forward? But even if you're in a creative role, I just think having a sense for and the ability to interpret the data is really important. And again, I think not looking at just like a snapshot in time, but overall, what are the broader trends? Not just for marketing, obviously the overall business, but like given what we're talking about here, for marketing as well. So if there are folks on the call and they're like, oh, it's not really my job, I'm not, the analyst, or just not my thing, I would say that's an area where everyone needs to stretch themselves in the digital world and understand what it means and everything associated with the consumer behavior behind it, implications to the creative side, and just recognize that it's iterative. So we're never going to be done.
That's right. Yeah, it's so important to kind of think about both, kind of the left brain and the right brain. Obviously we have our data and the analysis, but how people are reacting, right? Like what creative is actually working, I think is so important. Making sure those two kind of talk to each other is super important. That's great to hear. Anything else that you can share from sort of a creative perspective? I'm sure you get to do so many cool things creatively.
It's really it's really trying stuff. It's testing and learning. I mean, I can tell you after, we like, even in my current role and even previously, like we do a lot of brainstorms and get together, and the great ideas can come from anywhere. Like truly great ideas can come from anywhere. Usually not from me, usually from people on my team or other teams. But and it's just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. But so here's the caveat. But when you look at the overall marketing budget, and the way we like to think about it is certain percent, we like to think about, okay, that's like that's our innovation budget. We still need to deliver results. So anyone that says, okay, like let's just test everything, that's just not going to happen. But making sure with everything you're doing, there's a certain portion of it where you're really reserving it, and that's kind of an area of focus for us to make sure that we're trying new stuff across the board.
Yeah, back to the testing and learning. That's awesome. A question has come in, so I want to ask this one from the audience. What practices and guidelines do your companies have in place to respect that relationship or avoid oversaturation? I imagine that's between the consumer and the brand.
Nothing in particular that I can think of. I mean, I think of our group in particular. Honestly, there's nothing I can think of, because our audiences to a certain extent are, there's certainly crossover, but they're different as well. So a good example at NBCU, like Telemundo is part of our family. So if anything, like the audiences, there's a good opportunity to collaborate. It's actually our process internally is called Symphony. And just kind of how we work and leverage a lot of the data and the information we have. So I think it's more about collaborating more than anything. There is some stuff going on kind of on the corporate side that is more kind of ad sales driven. I don't know, honestly, I don't know enough about it to speak to it, and I wouldn't want to say the wrong thing. But in our smaller world, there's not a lot.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I would say too, from my end, InMobi's core business is really around users engaging with ads and apps, right? And I think that there's sort of that two-way communication street. And of course, when we have our SDK, our tech, and these 5,000 apps in the US, for example, the last thing we want is to make consumers upset. So I think we really partner with a lot of the app developers to make sure that we're running ads in slots that are in a natural content break, for example, or we're only running ads at a certain frequency that we know will delight users, as opposed to sort of make them frustrated within those app experiences. So I think making sure that you have learnings around what creative is working and what what slots do well in terms of video or rich media or gamification, for example, I think is super important. That's kind of what we're doing at InMobi. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, there's definitely on our end, there are definitely shared learnings, but again, it's different because we have windows for our different releases,
Yep.
and at a certain point of time, we may be the only place where you can get it. So there's not a lot of competing media. And by the way, I didn't mention to you that I was looking back after we talked the other day, and I actually have an InMobi carabiner from like years ago. I have no idea how I got it, but anyway, we can talk about it that separately. But I thought that was kind of funny after we spoke about, oh, InMobi, yeah, Robyn, yeah, I got that. So.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, now we can go hiking, Ted, with our
There we go.
carabiners.
There we
That's
go.
great. I love it. We'll have to, I haven't seen any in our swag closet lately. I'll have to see if I can get myself one. Cool. Anything else, Evie, from the audience for questions? Okay, I think we've got it one.
I just had one myself. Ted, you guys do such amazing creative work. And I know you talked a lot about engagement. Is there a campaign or a tactic that you've used over the last year or so that is one of your favorites for really proving out engagement?
Like one of the things I mentioned a little bit is, things like, well, it's two things. One is some of the trivia stuff. It sounds so kind of, old school, but it's kind of like a no-brainer because people, I mean, how many parties have you been to where it's like, oh yeah, who's the actor, or what are the things, or, what was that building called in that movie? And so those are things where people kind of want to almost, they want to show off, and it's fun. So I think those types of games in particular, and I think for us, just kind of more broadly, it's, thinking about all the different channels where we can kind of leverage what we're doing. So a good example is, so here's a plug. So, we have a slate of films coming up, and we're looking at, again, this is one of those things I really want to talk about it, but I'll say just more generally, like the games piece of it, mobile games, online games, things like that. Like, how can we, there's a lot of stuff that's been done that's been really cool with, like, the Robloxes of the world, et cetera. Like, or, I can say that there are partnerships, that there are things we're doing with the Xbox team. So like, what do we do there that's kind of fun and different and engaging? So kind of comes back to the whole gamification of it as well. So sorry, that's a long kind of convoluted response to a very short question.
No, that's okay. I mean, I also love the discussion around the partnerships and things like that. And, I think your example is a little bit better than, what was it? A donut combo for National Mustard Day, thanks to French's Mustard. So there are some really weird, convoluted brand partnerships, but yours was a little less esoteric. So thank you.
Oh, sure. Sure.
Unless you're wearing a suit to go watch Minions at the theater.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you
or
go.
at home for good family viewing, right?
That's right.
Wow. Okay. Robyn, any final words?
This has been super fun. I think, I've learned a lot today, Ted. So thank you for all of the insights and candor. Really appreciate everything that you've brought to us today, and hopefully everyone else learned something as well.
Great. Thank you, Robyn, and thanks to the Brand Innovators team. This stuff's always fun, and I appreciate you having me.